Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the PowettPlay Podcast. It's me, John and Shannon. As always, I'm joined by Kieran and Powell, but today we've got another special guest. We're joined by Carlos Brathwaite. How are you, Carlos?
All good. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's an absolute pleasure.
No, Carlos, we'll jump straight in. Obviously, man on the ground for the series in terms of commentating. What did I guess you observe as to why the West Indies have been, in my opinion, competitive up to the halfway stages of matches, but not being able to, I guess, continue that for the second half of the matches.
To be honest, firstly, I would say I think the boys are doing well. Um, because of how competitive they have been up until halfway. When the third day eventually happens, or in case of the second test, the fourth day happens, and there's a quick wrap up, then we kind of forget how competitive they were in the first part. And if we be honest, you think back to Australia coming to these shores, ranked number one, um, and just playing a World Test Championship final. I think most people, if not everyone, expected Australia to just wipe the floor of West Indies, and that's not been the case. So, I mean, I commended the fitness from the standpoint of the bowlers running in and bowling hard every session, pace not dropping. Whilst doing that, they've been hearing around in the field, diving around. It's been really good to watch. The question of fitness then comes in, I guess, from a batting standpoint. If you can, field 90 overs almost back to back and then come and put in a solid fourth innings performance. But if I'm being totally honest, I just think is a lack of skill, is a skill deficiency when you're coming against the best bowling attack in our era on deteriorating pitches, and you got guys that hammering away and questioning your technique ball after ball. In the second innings in the first test, we survived 33 overs, 33.3, and in this test, 34.3. So we haven't been able to find answers to get past that period where the ball normally gets softer and batting gets easier, which is around 28 to 30 overs. And I think it's because of the immense skill in the Aussies with the ball and lack of skill of our guys with the bat.
You think that lack of skill is down to probably our domestic structure? I mean, obviously the pitches, as you've mentioned, deteriorating the way that they do, and you're thinking about day two and three of test matches, which should be probably the best 2 days of batting,
So
and you're
that's
looking
true.
for more deterioration probably towards the back half of day four into day five. Outside of the pitches, do you think it's like a lack of preparation in terms of obviously the domestic structure? Are we getting proper coaching, proper facilities? Are these guys hitting enough balls? Because most of these guys are playing shorter formats of the game as well. So they're not used to batting 150, 200, 300 balls on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think it's a big combination of all, to be honest. I think we play around the same time, and you know that we complain about pitches year in, year out. We heard stop making excuses, find ways to make runs. And I always ask the question, if it is that the pitches are good enough and our players are just bad, then why when teams come to the Caribbean, we seldom ever see 500 run scores,
Yeah.
450 scores. Everyone comes to the Caribbean and averages the same 30 and 35 that our players average. But we slander our players and we don't look to put things in place to help them bridge the gap between where we are now and where the rest of the world is. And you look to the Englands and the Australians and the Indians, the South Africans of this world and say, oh, this one averages 50 and that one averages 50. But when you come up having to survive for your life and you can only play one shot on a pitch, then when you come to play on a pitch that is good enough to play four or five or six shots, you're not accustomed playing them shots. And that may sound ridiculous from the average fan, but I've experienced obviously the Caribbean lifestyle, way of training, way of preparing, and there's no fault or lack of effort. But when I experienced being, well, not county cricket in the sense of first class cricket, but being at Warwickshire for a couple of years, just the access to facilities. I remember just after COVID, sorry, I tried to use the gym at 6 a.m. and I was told the gym hasn't been cleaned and it was that way for 2 weeks. You compare that to Warwickshire, where when I was coming back from injury, I was in Warwickshire at 6:45 a.m. every morning. It would be the front desk, the security, and the physio. We do our work. So by the time 9 o'clock comes and everybody reports for training, I already done my prehab, my workout, my training session. So if I do anything else, is extra.
Yeah.
We want that sort of commitment from players, but we're not giving them the access or the facilities to be able to put that work in. So how do we then expect players to bridge that gap? Inside Warwickshire, you have the main ground, which they probably don't even need to use. You've got the nursery ground, which got about 5 or 6 pitches, sometimes 3 to 4 prepared. Even the unprepared pitches play as well as our prepared pitches. And then you've got indoor facility with about 8 lanes. I mean, these numbers subject to obviously correction. They're just talking from memory. But what I'm trying to paint the picture of is access. It's okay to say, I want y'all guys to be hitting 1,000 balls. Okay, are the coaches well paid enough? And not well paid enough because the coaches need to drive Range Rovers, but are they well paid enough that this can be their only job? Well paid enough that somebody else is banging down the door behind them, ensuring that if they can't put a good value to their work, they know somebody else is hungry. So it then incentivizes them to go and learn more. Are we asking our coaches to go and be level 3, level 4 certified? Are we doing um, coach transfers and exchanges so that some of our coaches go to India, Bangladesh, South Africa, Australia, and learn other ways? Like, I see other territories do these things all the time. And whenever I suggest them, it's always like this novel idea. It is not novel. Why can't we get some of our players to go to England, play club cricket, get a couple county second 11 games somewhere? Like the other day, Akeem Jordan went to England. Couldn't get the West Indies team playing club cricket. Gone and play for Kent, 5 on debut. Anderson Phillip gone and play for Lancashire.
Yeah.
Obviously, Jaden Seals is a different story. He's right at the peak of his powers now. We're talking about 2 guys that not in the West Indies team. People would say, oh, they're not fast enough, they're not good enough. It's just bad Caribbean batters. They've gone to county game and proved that they're worthy. Why can't we get some of our batters now doing the same thing? So I feel we don't have the facilities. I don't know if we have the resources, but can we now be a little bit more resourceful with the resources that we have and give players more access to facilities so that we can start to bridge that gap?
I mean, everything you're saying, it sounds like things I've been hammering away at for years. And well, how long have we been into this podcast, John? Probably a year and a half.
18 months, and it's just like,
All right.
yeah.
And I've been saying all of these things for the full 18 months. But for me, Carlos, what I would like to say, and I'd probably like to get your thoughts on this, is obviously, as you said, the first thing that is always mentioned is, okay, but how will we fund it or how will we pay for this? I think that the academy is a great concept, obviously, but those guys are at the very beginning stages of their careers where you still have to go and filter them into their domestic franchises and they still have to blossom. I would like to see something like this, but on an A-team level, guys that are, as you mentioned, the Anderson Phillips, the Joel Andrews, these younger guys that are just starting their international careers or on the brink, on the cusp, having sort of A-team contracts as opposed to regional contracts, and they be based in Antigua, and outside of this season, they be taken on tours to. And as I've said before to you, Jordan, is for me, it would be something as simple as 2 tours a year, one to some subcontinental country to work on spin, one to some sort of country that aids pace or swing, whether it be the Australia, the New Zealand, the England, as you said, club cricket. I think that should be a prerequisite outside of the first class season because of when our season is. Perfect timing. Sign guys up. You're already paying them a contract. Tell the clubs, look, we've got it covered. We just need accommodation for these guys and a little bit of money so that you can buy food on a weekly basis so that guys can play club cricket. But what do you think of a structure like that where you have an A-team setup where guys are exposed to different conditions, different types of training, different methods of how to go about performing at an international level?
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see what the numbers look like in terms of resources, because it's widely documented that we don't get enough money, whatever enough is. But grandparents always talking about it makes no sense crying over spilt milk. My thing would be the resources that we do have, how can we reallocate them? So I actually quite like that idea. Like it's time now for solutions.
Yeah.
And that's a solution. And I've always felt like we bring players into international cricket too quickly and then we drop them too quickly. So we say at this level, our system is not good enough. So yeah, resources is a big thing. I think the question is how can we be more resourceful? And why I like your idea, because it's time for solutions. And we have this general consensus around West Indies cricket that our first class structure is not good enough to create international players consistently that'll be successful. Yet, when a player performs, we're quick to just shove them into international cricket. If they fail, we then shove them out into international cricket straight back down to the level that we already agree is not good enough. So I think why I like your idea is because it gives like a stepping stone. So you've done really well, you go up to the A team, and not only because you're kind of proving yourself that you're ready to go to the next level, but you're also solidifying what you know. Like the beauty of having this conversation with somebody like yourself, Paul, is because you've seen from a young age the rise and falls, and you understand the game now. I'm sure as a mature professional into some of the things you can and can't do. And I would say similar for myself. But why do we need to find these out at 36 when other nations find this out at 26?
Yeah.
All right, Carlos. So, I mean, I definitely agree with you on that point, but we have to address that the bowling unit, to me, and as I mentioned to John in our past episode as well, I think is probably the third best seam bowling attack in the world at this point after Australia and South Africa. Like these guys are really putting their hand up. They're consistent. They're penetrative. You know, they offer every aspect of skills spectrum that the captain could require in terms of pace, accuracy, skill. What do you think of how this bowling unit has gone so far in the series?
I'll tell you what, in recent memory, I can't remember a West Indies bowling attack that has been as accurate, hostile, and effective. So yeah, with regards to bowling attacks, they're probably as good as I've seen from the West Indies for a while. There was that attack with Jason Holder, Kemar Roach, and Shannon Gabriel. We beat Sri Lanka, I think, or drew with Sri Lanka at home. We beat Bangladesh. And I think quickly after or before they had the COVID series and they won a game in England as well. And I just think back to that period where you thought, there's a little bit of a resurgence coming to Test cricket. For some reason, whenever we talk resurgence in the West Indies Test cricket, it always starts with good fast bowling,
Yeah.
being able to take 20 wickets. And I think this cohort, we got to find a way. I mentioned it on air. We have to find a way to be able to incentivize these guys to play first class cricket and then put the body on rest to be able to play for West Indies in Test cricket long term, like next 5 to 10 years. And it's going to be bold. It's going to mean taking Shamar Joseph out to the T20 leagues, out of playing for West Indies in T20 cricket, but finding a way to supplement that financially and allowing him to understand that he can build his legacy. Jaden Seals is not in as many T20 leagues, so that may not be that much of an issue. Alzari, you got to have a conversation with Alzari. Alzari is wanted on the circuit, right, for big money at IPL. He's also at a stage, a kind of delicate stage where he's given a lot of his career to West Indies cricket, and he's foregone a lot of deals as well to be able to play 3 formats for West Indies. So is he at the stage where he now wants to go on the circuit, or does he want to continue to build that legacy that he's been building? So all these are conversations to be had. Anderson Phillip has now put himself in that equation. I think one of the people that we continue to forget is the forgotten, or is the forgotten man in that group is Justin Graves. He's done a stellar job allowing the bowlers to get some rest, but also starting back after sessions. And in the commentary box, we are like, why the 2 of the premier bowlers not starting? And then last test, he come bang, bang, Steve Smith and Bo Webster gone. So he's been doing a stellar job as well. You have your handling on the bench. You got Akim Jordan, who would have toured a couple times, Jediah Blades. So there's a nice, proper fast bowlers coming through. How do we now get them to progress as a group so that we can pull from 5, 6, 7, potentially 8 bowlers and can take them on tour? We gotta be honest, these bowlers will break down. The body isn't made to bowl fast. So when they do break down, how can we get someone that can fill the breach? Hazelwood steps out, Scott Boland steps in.
Yeah.
How can we create that kind of rotated belt? So is a for the fast bowlers that we know the style we want to play, having enough bowlers that can fit that style, and knowing that if someone gets injured, we got someone ready and ready to go to fill the breach. If Josh Hazelwood gets injured, Scott Boland can do it. Lance Marsh can step in. Sean Abbott has been touring with the team. So we need to create that in the West Indies as well. But it is a fantastic start. I've been very, very impressed.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Perfect. That's it from me, John. I don't know if you have any questions, but
Well, if we finish them anyway, that'd be a different thing. No, but no, I do appreciate. Obviously, like I said, it'd be good to. It's good to, get your opinion. I'd love to get you back on again if we could as well. To be fair,
With better Wi-Fi this time.
yeah, yeah.
Just want to say a shout out to the editors. Whenever this comes out, there's been about 15 chops and changes because my Wi-Fi has been absolutely poor. So my apologies.
No, I appreciate you joining us, Carlos. Thank you.
Take care.
Cheers. Thank you. So it wasn't quite the chat we had planned with Carlos due to a few issues technically, shall we say, with the quality of Wi-Fi. But some of his points he was making there were, well, exactly what you've been saying for 18 months.
it's crazy because apart from Carlos's Wi-Fi, no, it's a lot of things, and people sort of listen and think that players are harping on about these things or whatever the case is, and just shut up and dribble, as the reporter said to LeBron James, if you remember. But it's I mean, if so many players that would have played outside of the Caribbean and experienced how other countries do things. Obviously, as Carlos has mentioned, we have a deficiency in terms of resources, but the West Indies board is now sort of in a position where they have, I guess, resources that they can allocate. I think this has been a problem where the West Indies board sort of didn't look into investing into facilities when the West Indies were on top of the world game in the 70s and the 80s, that 15-year period.
Yeah.
And so we got caught with our pants down when the rest of the world caught up in terms of technology and all these different advances that the world has, to the point where everyone's good against quick bowling, everyone's good against spin bowling, everyone has indoor facilities where a player can have a net at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m., access to nutritionists, psychologists, all these things. Whilst we may not be in a position to spend that type of money, there are ways in which we can sort of still be competitive. You look at Trinidad, for example, they've got quite a few private indoor centers that aren't costing an arm and a leg to create. You don't necessarily have to create something that is a Lord's indoor facility, but you can create something with a general roof structure, and it doesn't have to be a concrete roof. You've got different ways of doing it, and you can have the net so you can open both sides, so you have the airflow coming through. You've got the Caribbean breeze, so it's cool inside, and you've just got some lights running down each lane, so when night comes, you can still practice. And you be resourceful, and these things you'd expect to cost probably up to $100,000. So if you're talking about investing in 10 of these facilities across the Caribbean, in the major hubs, plus a few out territories, but you're talking about 6 where the franchises are based.
Yes.
So where the international teams come, you have the franchises base there, you know you have a high quality facility,
Yeah.
and then some of the other international grounds, you have the core basis for a higher standard of preparation. And so that gives you a better chance of producing better players and competing more holistically on an international scale. So it's just good to hear. Obviously, Carlos's views, being the man on the ground, having been commentating for the first two Test matches,
Yeah.
what he was seeing, what he has seen, sorry, with it being in alignment with what we've been speaking about.
Yeah, definitely. It was good to get his points a bit made about coming over to England. It's the points that we made there. You mentioned the point about Hakeem Jordan. He spoke about, Anderson Phillip being over here, like coming over here. Like these, it echoes the points that we've made, which is good. And to hear him speak so positively about, the bowling attack, which is what we've spoke about. It was good. I sort of just finished sort of wrapping up in terms of obviously following on from the conversation that we had on Saturday about how we believed or that the West Indies had to go and win that game. Do you believe the partnership with Cam Green and Steve Smith was just took that game away from him completely at that point?
Well, obviously, that's definitely the partnership that took the game away. But we always knew two things. A, Steve Smith wasn't going to fail twice in
No.
pretty much any match. That's hardly going to happen.
No.
And B, if you couldn't control the other end, what Steve Smith was making his contribution or his impact on the game, if you weren't able to still strike consistently from the other end, then it was going to be a tricky situation. I did say from the outset that if the West Indies can get anywhere from 275 to 350, they'll be competitive. You've heard Carlos say again, teams that score 4, 5, 600 in other conditions do not score those scores in the Caribbean. Hence why I said 275, 350, because I know how difficult it is to play cricket in the Caribbean on these pitches. If we're talking about playing in Australia, then the numbers out throughout would be completely different. But for Caribbean conditions, I've heard after a series the great Mike Hussey sit at a bar and talk about batting and how completely different and how much of a difficult task it was
Yeah.
batting and playing in the Caribbean, because when you do get to play a good shot, the outfields are so heavy that you get no value for it as well, and how frustrating it was for them coming from where they come from. So I think that, obviously there are many moving parts. People are going to want to get down on the players. I think that as anything else, you have to give the players time, but you also have to identify a batch of young players that you think could be the next group of guys and start preparing them from now,
Yeah.
whilst giving this bunch of players time. And you need to fix better pitches. The pitches have to be of the standard where it doesn't matter if you're playing in India, Australia, South Africa, whatever the case is, that you feel as though you can play your shots and different shots, as Carlos mentioned, as opposed to only having one scoring shot because of the type of pitches that you're playing on.
Yeah. Yeah. And what did you think of Shane Roston's tactics after the break when they came out a bit more aggressive? Would you have liked to have seen a bit more of an aggressive stance earlier on? Or would you think that was a bit of a counteract, a bit of a counteract mentality to think if we are going to win this game, it's going to have to be that approach?
I wasn't necessarily a fan of Shea's approach. I think that, he's not even necessarily that aggressive in T20 or ODI cricket. So
Yeah.
I think it was an extremist approach to the other end. I don't think that that was gonna work against that bowling attack
Yeah.
for very long. We've seen guys do it, but on much better pitches.
True.
Guys that are
True.
playing a lot more consistent red ball cricket.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, I understood what he was trying to do in terms of being proactive and, not just being, I guess, a sitting duck and waiting for his number to be called. But I think that there were probably different ways that he could go about it. I mean, you see the way Roston went about it, being positive as well, having a positive intent, but
Yeah.
not being OTT, where it looked as though you're literally just trying to have a go at every ball that's bowled. So I think that there needs to be a balance, as I said in the previous episode as well. I do think that they needed to play with intent but intent and reckless intent are two different things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. But we're going to let's look ahead, obviously, to the third test, and we'll do a preview of that back end of this week before the test starts. And we'll discuss changes, potential changes, various other bits and pieces. But I think that I do apologise to people with it. We didn't quite go to plan with Carlos, but we'll definitely look to get him on again soon because I do that, as we discussed, the points he was making and the points between you two were talking about it as well. It is something that we'd love to get into and dissect, a bit further really with these ideas. It's something that we want to be looking into, and the Cricket West Indies should be looking into to ultimately improve and develop on a whole, really.
Yeah, I mean, shouts out to Digital for that Wi-Fi connection that Carlos has. I think you've got some work to do there. So please get that sorted out so that we can have him back on again and finish our chat. But no, in all seriousness, no, obviously, yeah, it would be good to finish the chat and have a more in-depth, detailed conversation
Yeah.
where we can dive into a few more things. But I do think that he touched on some very important and interesting topics.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us on the PowettPlay Podcast. Please keep liking, please keep subscribing. We really do appreciate it. And yeah, let us know what your thoughts and any questions, and Karen will get back to you. So thank you very much for joining us on this episode of the PowettPlay Podcast. Thank you.